Hello and welcome. I'm Nina from Immunity Group Podcast. Today's discussion is on how the food we eat can impact our gut microbiome, which plays a major role in our overall health and well-being beyond the gut itself. We also explore how what we do to our food from the time we bring it home from the supermarket shelves to the time it is consumed can change the communities of beneficial bacteria our gut receives and food safety of the fresh produce. Our guests today are Penny Galbraith, a food microbiome researcher, and David Spadaro, a researcher and science communicator. Both are from the CSIRO. The CSIRO is Australia's national science agency and is one of the world's largest multidisciplinary science and tech organizations. It has state-of-the-art research infrastructure and over 5,000 dedicated people working across 49 sites in Australia and globally. For more than a century, CSIRO has been improving the lives of people everywhere with their science. Since it started life as the Advisory Council of Science and Industry in 1916, CSIRO has advanced Australia with a range of inventions and innovations that have had significant positive impact on the lives of people around the world. These include fast Wi-Fi, polymer banknotes, extended wear contact lenses, Hendra vaccine, AeroGuard, and the CSIRO Total Wellbeing Diet, to name just a few. CSIRO works with the industry, government, and research community to turn scientific challenges into solutions. These include sustainable agriculture and food security, sustainable energy and resources, health and well-being, resilient and valuable environments, future industries, and more. And of course, the topic for today's conversation is food quality and health and well-being. Penny and David are part of the CSIRO's Microbiome Research Group, which aims to harness the invisible and invaluable communities of microbes that enhance our environment, our food, and ultimately our health.
My name is Penelope Galbraith. I'm a research fellow at CSIRO and I'm part of the Microbiomes for One System Health team. So we do a whole range of different research on all types of microbiomes, but my work looks specifically at the fresh produce microbiome, and it could be this interesting link in the environment to human gut microbiome continuum.
And Penny, tell us, what is a microbiome in relation to the human gut and fresh fruit and veggies?
Yeah, great question. So many of us will have heard of the human gut microbiome. So that's the collection of the bacteria, fungi, viruses, and other microbes that live inside our gut. So most of our gut microbes are actually our friends, and they help us with things like digestion, acquiring nutrients, and helping to train our immune systems to recognize pathogens and fight off disease. But our gut microbiome isn't the only kind of microbiome that exists. There are actually microbes all around us. So think about the water, the soil, and the plants, and even the air in our environment. Each of those have their own unique microbiomes. And because we're always interacting with our environment, microbes are constantly getting transferred from these microbiomes into our microbiome in this kind of continuum. So yeah, I guess that's kind of what an explanation of the microbiome is and how they're interconnected.
There
Um,
is so much in the media about what is healthy, what is not
mm,
healthy, buy this drink, buy that tablet. So what is actually the reason for us wanting to have a healthy gut microbiome?
yeah, so we know now through decades of research that a healthy, diverse gut microbiome is actually essential for good human health. So if you have a healthy gut microbiome, that microbial community actually helps to protect you from a range of diseases and gives you a whole lot of different benefits. So, firstly, these microbes can help us break down certain compounds in our digested food to make nutrients that keep us healthy, like vitamins or short chain fatty acids. And they also help to keep our immune systems healthy so we can defend ourselves against disease causing microbes if we ever come across them. Um, so basically, that's why we want a healthy microbiome, and we don't want an unhealthy microbiome. So, otherwise known as gut dysbiosis, that can lead to a whole range of different issues. So, some are just things like bloating, diarrhea, constipation, and inflammation of the gut. But an unhealthy gut microbial community can also lead to more serious long term conditions too. So, that can be things like inflammatory bowel disease, diabetes, and even arthritis. So, to avoid being at increased risks of these and other diseases, it's important to try and maintain a healthy gut microbiome.
It sounds pretty scary when you list them all up one after another. We also have David in the audience. David, would you like to introduce yourself and let's hear from you?
Hi, I'm David Spadaro. I'm the science communicator for the for Penelope's group, the CSIRO microbiome group. I've been with CSIRO for 20 years and originally started in contaminants research and moved into this new microbiome role.
What a great crossover from contaminants research to good and bad microbiome components. What do you think of the gut microbiome? What are your first thoughts?
Well, it plays a very important role in our health and well-being, and in ways that we're only just starting to uncover. There's a gut-brain link, and I just read about today that there's a gut-lung link as well. So we're just scratching the surface on what we know and how important these microbes play in our overall health.
And you had some questions for Penelope.
Absolutely. So how do we originally develop a gut microbiome? Were we born with bacteria in our gut? And what role does fresh produce play in our gut microbiome?
Great question, David. So the thing is, developing a gut microbiome is actually this really fascinating journey that actually begins at birth. So before birth in the womb, babies are generally sterile, meaning they don't actually have any of their own microbes. So they basically only receive their first dose of microbes during birth. So in a natural birth, this would happen as they pass through their mother's birth canal. But for babies born via C-section, doctors may sometimes use a swab with the mother's microbiota to help initiate this mother to infant microbial transfer. So those initial microbes quickly go on to start colonizing the newborn, and they form that first foundation of the new human gut microbiome. But the thing is, as life goes on, new microbes are continually introduced into the baby's gut microbiome through early feeding, especially through breast milk, helping to establish that budding gut ecosystem. But over the lifetime, diet becomes this really huge player in shaping the diversity of our gut microbiome. And fresh fruits and veggies actually play a key role. So the thing is, fresh produce tends to be loaded with fibers and unique compounds that actually help to feed our gut microbes and help them to thrive and produce beneficial substances for our health. But the other thing that our fresh fruits and veggies do is they can actually provide this ongoing source of new microbes coming in uh, through the diet, some of which we think, according to our research, can actually stick around and start integrating into the developing gut microbiome.
So when I think of bacteria and food, I think of upset stomachs. So how can studying the community of bacteria on food actually improve food safety?
Yeah, it's really common, isn't it? Often when we think of microbes, we think of disease and pathogens which cause food poisoning. But the thing is, in reality, very few microbes are actually pathogens. So the fresh, uncooked fruits and veggies we eat are actually covered in billions of microbes. And very rarely are these actually going to make us sick. So, the thing is, some of these could actually be beneficial and help to protect us from disease. Um, but they can also help our fruits and veggies stop being colonized by things like pathogens. So that's because some microbes on our fruits and veggies can be natural predators or competitors of pathogens. Um, and we know this because of different kinds of studies. So for example, one study found that fermented milk, which contained lactic acid bacteria, could actually help stop the growth of the foodborne pathogen Listeria, Listeria monocytogenes, which is a pretty serious foodborne pathogen. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits of studying the food microbiome.
Is there a way also, Penny, when we study the microbiome, can we then use that knowledge to enhance the food quality and bring some health benefits to the consumers?
Yeah, of course. So studying the microbiomes of fresh produce can actually help us identify beneficial communities of microbes on our foods that could actually help ward off pathogens and other unwanted microbes like molds and spoilage bacteria. So we know raw fresh produce could actually be one of the most important ongoing sources of microbes in our diets. And having these diverse sources of beneficial microbes on our food can actually help to prime our immune system and make it more resilient to disease. So rather than sanitizing or sterilizing our foods, perhaps we should be looking towards and thinking about how we can actually keep the good microbes on our fresh foods while making them more resistant to pathogen contamination and spoilage.
So in your
So yeah,
research, did you come across any particular fruit and veggies which our gut likes to consume in particular to actually increase the presence of these beneficial microbes? Or is it that pretty much every single fruit and veggies on the shelf is potentially beneficial?
so eating a variety of foods, particularly fresh fruits and veggies, and fermented products, actually introduce different types of beneficial microbiomes and fibers to our diet. So each food comes with its own unique microbiome, which contribute to building a diverse gut microbiome. So we know a diverse gut microbiome is linked to better immune health, um, and because a broad range of microbes provides more resilience. So, fruits and veggies, as I said earlier, are loaded with fibers and unique compounds that also help to feed our gut microbes, helping them to thrive and produce beneficial substances. The thing with supplements is that often they just contain one or two individual strains of microbes, usually things like lactic acid bacteria or yeast. And there's actually evidence to suggest many of these probiotics on the market don't actually persist or establish themselves in the gut microbiome. So often they're more transient in nature and they probably only provide short-term benefits while you're actually taking the probiotics. Um, but the thing is, if you're constantly challenging your body's gut microbiome with new diverse sources of microbes every day by eating a varied diet rich in fruits and veggies, this is probably going to lead to more lasting health benefits.
So, to maximize the probiotic qualities of fresh produce, should we be washing our veggies when we bring them home from the shops?
I actually do get asked this question quite often. Um, and I think, the thing is, most of the microbes that live on fruits and veggies actually are encased in these protective biofilms on the surface of fresh produce. And these biofilms are often stuck very firmly onto the fresh produce, which often makes them quite resistant to being removed just by washing them in the sink at home. So basically, the effectiveness of washing the microbes off fruits and veggies varies a lot, and it depends on the type and surface structure of the fresh produce, as well as the nature of the microbes on that fresh produce. So, for example, washing smooth surface produce like apples is generally more effective for removing microbes, but even so, the tightly adhered microbes can still remain. Um, in some cases, washing doesn't actually do much to remove microbes at all, though. So, if we think about rough, porous, or textured produce like leafy greens or broccoli with a high surface area, washing might actually only have a very minor effect on removing microbes, and only the more loosely attached ones tend to actually get removed that way. So the thing is, it depends, but that's not necessarily an issue as long as there are no pathogens present on the produce. So, you know, I guess if your fruit and veggies are contaminated with pathogens, that is a concern, but that's rare. It's still recommended to wash your fruits and veggies before eating because it might still help to remove some of those loosely attached surface microbes, as well as potential chemical residues and bits of dirt that you might not want to eat.
Yeah, absolutely. Just an extension on that, I peel a range of fruit and vegetables prior to eating them, such as carrots, cucumbers, and sometimes apples, mainly for taste for my kids who are quite fussy. Am I losing all the good bacteria on the surface of these fruit and vegetables? Do good bacteria exist only on the surface?
That's so common. I remember I didn't like eating the peel on my fruits and veggies, so I used to get my mum to remove it as well. But um, the thing is, the majority of microbes on fresh produce actually do tend to inhabit the surface. So peeling may remove these. And that's because the surface is directly exposed to the soil, the water, and the air, all of which carry their own microbiomes that can be transferred onto the produce during growth, harvesting, and handling. We do know that in some cases, microbes can get inside and colonize the internal tissues, but the amount of microbes inside the produce tends to be far lower. So if you are removing the peel, you're probably removing the majority of the microbes. Uh, but the thing is, it's not just the microbes you're removing, you're actually removing a lot of the beneficial compounds found in many fruits and veggies. Often a significant proportion of them are just under the peel. So we know that for a medium-sized apple, the peel has almost 40% of the vitamin A and 25% of the fiber. So ideally, we aim to keep the skin on where feasible.
To let the kids know that as well.
You could try blending them up or something. A few different options.
Yeah, absolutely.
In our house, there is often a debate, how long should a carrot be cooked for? And the whole question is, does it actually, the cooking process, does it kill all the beneficial bacteria? Then we go to different restaurants. You have, let's say, some Asian food restaurants, veggies are more crunchy. Then you go to some European food restaurants and they're overcooked. So what's your opinion about, do we kill all the good beneficial bacteria by cooking our produce?
Yeah, so the thing is, cooking does kill off a lot of the microbes in our fruits and veggies. Um, but I suppose often we are cooking for a reason. Cooking can actually help to increase the availability of certain nutrients in foods and making them easier for our bodies to absorb. So for high fiber foods like carrots or broccoli, cooking can actually help to break down those tough fibers, making it easier to digest and unlock more nutrients like beta carotene in carrots and lutein in spinach and that kind of thing. Um, so, I think generally speaking, don't just switch to eating only raw veggies. I think it's good to incorporate cooked veggies as well, but a mix of raw and cooked can offer a good balance. Raw for probiotic benefits and cooked for the nutrients.
And what about molds? Often we think, okay, if we cut up a piece of apple and it has mold, we can eat the other side of the apple. Does mold persist in another way? And do we need to discard everything that's moldy?
Yeah, so the thing is, some molds are harmless or even edible, like the ones in blue cheese. Um, but actually, most of the molds that grow on food items tend to be harmful. They can actually produce harmful toxins that can make us really sick. So, some of these toxins can cause damage to our organs, like the kidney and the liver, and in some cases, they can be carcinogenic. So, really, we don't want to be eating mold. But, can you safely remove mold from food and salvage the rest? Well, that depends. So, for things like hard cheeses, like Parmesan or cheddar, or firm fruits and veggies like carrots and potatoes, the mold typically doesn't penetrate too deeply. So, if you really want, you can salvage the unaffected parts from the food of the foods, but you just have to cut at least 3 centimeters around and below the moldy area. That's the general recommended guideline. But don't do this for soft or porous foods like berries or peaches or bread, because the molds can actually spread really quickly and deeply and leave behind toxins. So in those cases, it's best to just throw them away. If in doubt, just throw it away.
I think the first thing after our interview, I'll go through my entire fridge and inspect every single piece of fruit and veggie. And it's definitely something that probably a lot of chefs are grappling with as well. So this is very, very useful. So thank you for that comment.
No worries.
We get quite a lot of moldy bread in our household, and that sparks quite a lot of debate whether we just throw out the slice or throw out the whole bag, but it seems like it's the whole bag for bread.
The spores can spread so quickly in those porous matrices.
And I guess holding the bag holds them in there as well. So yeah.
Yes.
So is organic better than non-organic produce in terms of the amount of good, healthy bacteria found on the surface of vegetables?
Yeah, so I guess one thing that people might think is if you're producing organic produce, you're using fewer synthetic agrochemicals compared to the conventionally farmed produce, and maybe that conserves some more of the microbiome. But actually, according to various studies, there's not conclusive evidence that organically grown and conventionally grown produce leads to any significant difference in health outcomes for consumers. So, you know, they often can have somewhat different microbiomes to each other, but it's likely that factors like overall diet diversity and food safety practices and the consumption of a variety of fruits and veggies will actually have a much more significant impact on the microbiome. So, yeah, basically, eating a variety of fresh produce, regardless of whether it's organically produced or not, is probably going to have a bigger impact on your health.
And you touched on earlier about naturally fermented food. So what are naturally fermented food and why is it of benefit to the human gut microbiome?
Yeah, so some people would have heard of things like sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, or yogurt. So these are all naturally fermented foods, and basically they contain these live beneficial bacteria, which are specifically selected during the production process. So basically, during production, these microbes are allowed to grow, and over time, they form these significant ecosystems, which contain often hundreds or even thousands of times more microbes per gram than the raw fresh produce. Um, so we do this because the microbes that we introduce can often ferment carbohydrates in the food matrix into things like lactic acid, which helps to preserve the food from spoilage and invasion by other microbes. Um, the thing is, yeah, so these fermented foods that can have these well-established probiotic benefits and actually help improve digestion and support the immune function. So they are something else, another additional part of the toolkit in helping to promote a healthy gut microbiome.
One question which just came to mind is about sugar. Is there any linkage between microbiome and sugar?
The microbiome and sugar. Yeah, that's an interesting one. So we know that on teeth, and I don't research this, but high carbohydrate and high sugar diets tend to promote different types of oral microbiomes compared to people who have a lower sugar diet. And often these higher sugar diets will lead to increased rates of growth of plaque, which then go on to cause dental caries and other kinds of issues with our teeth. So, having too much sugar in the diet can actually be bad for our oral microbiome.
That's a brilliant answer. And often, how they say also animals should not consume sugar because it can make them go blind. So obviously there is some potential link between eye microbiome and the sugar
Mm.
in that regard. What about household cleaning and over cleanliness? I know that maybe a decade ago, Perth was the cleanest city in the world. Are we too clean in Australia? Are we over sterile? I mean, of course, cleanliness has been credited with improvements in the nation's public health outcomes, but we are the allergy capital of the world, the dust mite capital of the world. So how do we balance this cleanliness with a 21st century lifestyle on a daily basis and maintaining good and healthy microbiome?
That's such a massive question, and I wish I could give you the best answer, but really I'm just working off the research that is available right now. So the thing is, yes, cleanliness is crucial, but the thing is, the evidence suggests that having an overly sterile lifestyle may actually reduce contact with beneficial microbes. So, as you said, much of our developed world throughout Australia, we now live in these modern urban industrial lifestyles. But in actually moving towards those indoor lifestyles with more hygiene, better hygiene practices, and more widespread use of sanitizers and antibiotics, uh, we have significantly reduced our contact with the natural microbiomes that were previously common in our past when we lived closer to nature. So, as a consequence, this has actually altered our microbial exposure. We know that at the same time, these changes have actually been associated with rising rates of chronic health conditions like things like allergies and autoimmune diseases. So there's actually this thing called the hygiene hypothesis or the old friends hypothesis. And basically, what this suggests is that this reduced exposure to diverse environmental microbiomes can actually contribute to the increasing prevalence of these diseases. So we know, for example, that people who live in modern urban environments often have less diverse microbiomes compared to people from traditional nomadic or rural communities. So, it's this really interesting and active area of investigation. But I suppose a balanced approach is probably trying not to over sanitize. The evidence does suggest that spending time outdoors, gardening, or even having pets can actually increase exposure to beneficial microbes in a healthy way. So, and we also know that eating fresh produce and fermented foods can be part of this approach to help, provide that ongoing contact with diverse sources of microbiomes to make our immune systems more resilient to disease.
So if you have a sandwich in your hand and it falls down on the ground, what's your opinion about this 5-second rule? Do you just pick it up and eat it, or do you just leave it for the birds?
It's funny, isn't it? Because that 5-second rule, 5 seconds has just become the arbitrary amount of time that food is dropped on the floor before it becomes unsafe to eat. I remember hearing that as a child. Um, but in reality, this is a myth. Thing is, if you drop a sandwich on the floor, microbes can be transferred instantly as that contact occurs. So, you know. But I guess what we should be more concerned about is whether the floor might actually have potential pathogens on it that could make that dropped food unsafe to eat. So, for example, if you drop your sandwich on the floor of a public toilet, no amount of seconds should justify eating it. Please just throw it away. um, but in a relatively clean environment, for example, if I dropped my sandwich on the carpet of my bedroom floor, um, it probably won't have any pathogens on it. So, the occasional drop snack on a surface like this probably won't cause a healthy immune system any harm. So yeah, I guess bottom line is if you're concerned there might be a potential source of pathogens on the ground, it's safer to just avoid eating the food from the floor.
And as
Is
one
it
of,
lo- Oh, sorry. Is
you
it
go,
like
you
the
go.
mold rule? So if do we just cut off the part that's hit the floor? Do we throw out the whole piece of it, or can we cut off bits of it depending on how it landed on the floor and bounced?
I think if it's come into contact with any surface like a public toilet floor, I would just
Oh,
throw the whole thing away because you never know. There could be microbes that are, projected during that impact onto the rest of the produce, and even small doses of certain kinds of fecal pathogens can cause very harmful diseases. So, probably safer to assess on a case by case basis. No public toilet floor sandwiches, please.
okay, absolutely.
I can't help but think about the toddlers, and they drop things all the time, and dummies and bottles, and
Oh,
very often
yes.
mothers just don't even have time to wash it. They don't even think about it, put back into their mouth. I wonder, what does that do to their microbiome? I guess it would make them more diverse.
It's funny, isn't it? I'm like, is it a correlation or causation? How babies seem to not care about sanitizing anything. They're happy to just eat the dirt and, lick the dog and all this other kind of stuff. So maybe, it's not a bad thing at all. These could even be adaptations in a way because it helps those infants to get exposure to diverse microbial communities to promote the growth of their own gut microbiome. So I wouldn't be surprised, but I'm not sure if anyone's done any research on that.
Almost like a natural way of diversifying the gut.
Yes.
And
Especially if it lands on a natural surface. I mean, it goes back to our previous point of being overly sterile, our environment. So if if the sandwich falls on grass, then yeah, perhaps it's a good thing.
Potentially. That's right. I guess, yeah. Again, looking out for any sources of potential contamination. But yeah, I think, it's all part of that environment to human gut microbiome continuum. Sometimes these environmental microbiota can be directly transferred from the soil into our mouths if we're just dropping the sandwich straight onto the soil. And that doesn't have to necessarily be a bad thing.
That's
And if
right. And I
someone,
guess
You go.
I guess that's the idea of the being connected to your environment, that one system health. You know, the microbiome can be transferred from the environment to our food, and then to our own microbiome.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's what the Mosh platform does so well at Cyro. It tries to interconnect all different types of microbiomes in this microbial continuum, from insects like bees to soldier flies. And then we've got people who are researching biosolids produced from wastewater treatment. We've got people researching animal microbiomes, the human gut microbiome, and how they're all interconnected. It's fascinating stuff.
So there is
Absolutely.
a lot of job opportunity for anybody in the future, scientists who wish to perhaps study this field.
Job opportunities. Yeah. You'd hope that in future that the research will continue to be developed and supported through funding sources. But I guess we'll have to see where it ends, how it ends up.
I hope that Australia definitely will lead the world, at least to eliminate some of the first in the world in a more negative connotation way. And just for the end, what would be your sort of 3 main tips for a healthy and more diverse microbiome? If someone asks you on the street, please, Penny, how can I help diversify my microbiome? I really want to do this for my family and myself. What would you say?
Wow, a lot of pressure on that question. I'm not sure I can provide the best answer, but I suppose my initial thoughts are number one, don't be overly obsessive with sterilizing everything. We only really need to be concerned about that when potential pathogens are involved. And killing off the beneficial microbes around us can actually cause harms for us later on in life in terms of increasing our risk of various kinds of immune system disorders. So I would say, don't be concerned with overly sterilizing everything. The second thing is make sure you have a rich and varied diet with a whole bunch of different kinds of vegetable and fruit materials. Often they have diverse sources of microbes inherently present on the surfaces. And so when you eat these, it's helping you get that exposure to lots of different types of microbes to help keep your immune system resilient. So I guess those are my main points.
What about you, David?
Well, I'm going to stop peeling my raw vegetables, that's for sure.
I think that's a good idea. And I think for myself, I will definitely throw away anything that's moldy without trying to dig out part of it. No
Yeah.
salvaging potatoes anymore from my end.
Yeah.
Penny, thank you so much. And David as well for your time. It's been a great discussion. I think it will open up opportunities for more questions from Australians and our global audiences. And it was a pleasure to meet you.
Thanks so much, Nina. Thanks so much for hosting me, and likewise to you, David.